Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream, we build Django apps. We're going to continue on my homeschooling application that I'm building and continue on some feature work that we were doing last week. So if that's interesting to you, stick around. If you're catching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, comment, do all the things that make YouTube happy. There's links below in the description that you can check out that might be helpful to you, where I just generally put stuff that's useful, I think. And there's plenty of ways to keep in touch with me. I've got a website above listed at mattlehman.com, mailing lists, the whole bit, all that. I do want to thank my patrons. You can join them at patreon.com/mblayman. And thanks to my patrons of Rupert, Andrew, Abdulaziz, Patrick, Eric, and Philip. I appreciate your support. That's really awesome. So we're going to continue with the feature that I was working on last week. We were doing some forecasting page for the application. As a reminder, if you're new, this application that I'm building is a homeschooling app. So it's part of my family. Both of my kids are homeschooled, and my wife is the user of this application. And it builds a schedule. So you feed it tasks, and it puts stuff on the schedule of these are the dates that matter for your school year. But the challenge with that approach is, since everything is not set to specific dates, you don't exactly know when stuff is going to end. So you need some kind of ability to see, do I have enough stuff to fill up my school year? Or am I going too far? Like maybe I'm falling behind and all the tasks that I put in extend beyond and into the next school year, and that's not good either. So the objective of this forecast page that we're building is to provide that at-a-glance view of, here are all your students, here's when they are expected to finish all of the coursework for the school year, and give that feedback to the user so that they can know, all right, maybe I need to add more stuff for this course, or I need to figure out how to condense my material here, because they don't necessarily know. This was a requested feature by my spouse, who is the primary customer that I have. And last week, we were working on refactoring. Some of this logic was actually embedded in a different page, kind of projecting out one course page at a time of, here's all the dates that the student is anticipated to finish a task. But we need a synopsis kind of view that will roll together all of the courses that a student is in for each student in the school and give them the answers of, here is the date that this is expected to end. That's the goal of this page that we're going to work through. And we've got some code to do that, but we have to finish up the wiring of all of that stuff. So that's the plan. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what I'm here for. The chat is open. I do ask that people be polite and civil. I will ban you if you can't be that way. Most people are not that way. Most of the time we have a really good conversation. So feel free to use the chat to ask questions, and let's dive right into it, shall we? So this particular task, I believe, is in this milestone. I don't remember which task number it is. It's this end date forecasting report is what we've got here. And there's not a lot of details here. So we have to figure out what's going to be on this page, where it's going to go, and first of all, get ourselves right back into the right view. I think I'm in the wrong file. So we'll start by getting ourselves on the view. And here it is. Right now, it's just a template view. There's nothing in here that's too fancy, aside from the actual school year object that populates the view. And we can fire up the local web development server and see what's going on. So let's do that to orient ourselves to the material that we need to see, and we'll get going from there. So I'm going to log in with my test account, which is just a local account that I have on this little database that I have on my machine, which has some data kind of pre-seeded in here. And we're going to jump to the school year page, and here's the school year. And so the new part, and one of the pieces that I was wrestling with last time we had this chat was, how's a user going to get to this? And I'm not super happy with the UI right now. And we talked through, well, if I add another button, it's going to look kind of clunky. And where's the navigation going? I don't really have good patterns kind of set for some of these detailed pages that are meant to be just a bunch of information. But for the interim, what I did is just put this link right here, which while not the best, is a reasonable spot to put it. So we're going to click on this page, and you can see that what it is intended to be is a report of the entire school year, and we're calling it the forecast report. So this page, as I'm imagining it, will, in its first incarnation, be pretty simple. It will be a student's name followed by all of the courses they are in for a school year, for their grade level, I guess. And then next to that will be a date that says, this is the expected date. We could get fancier and start highlighting the colors of these dates depending on when the school year is slated to end or something to that effect. But that's kind of a phase 2 of this process. The important part right now is getting the data in there. In fact, I think my wife is actually pretty eager to see this feature be complete and be out there. And so I don't think she's going to be super picky about the format. Granted, we don't want to look ugly, but we don't have to fret a ton about the actual feel. That can come later as she might want different or more information in this report. So I think the objective tonight is to get the data and then feed it to the right tool and display it. And maybe step 1, even before then, before we do the calculated data, which is the date stuff, is just to display the courses for the actual student. And so we can look at the previous views to help guide that and figure out which things we need to call. I think it's a method that exists on the student or somewhere. We're gonna have to find it. There's some challenges here with the way some of this data is modeled under the covers. I can bring up, we have a diagram that we often like to look at the stream that is the data model for this system. This is generated from a tool. So I did not build this myself, which is why it's kind of all over the place and it changes every time I generate it. If I change any of the modeling. So we'll do our best to look at it. But what we need to do is we need to get these courses. Courses are tied to a student via the enrollment. Where is it? So here's a student over here. Here's this enrollment model. And here's a grade level. The grade level, a student is in a grade level for the year. And a grade level is a container for a set of courses. And that relationship gets a little complicated because that's actually a many-to-many relationship, because a course can be in multiple grade levels. So I've got 2 kids, for example. They both take an art class, and there's not any differences between the art that my wife is teaching them at the moment because my kids are pretty close in age. So they have a shared art course. So the modeling is a little funky, I'll say, to get the actual data that we need. So there is a method that I have somewhere to get the ordered list of courses, and that ordering is also something that she wanted to be able to control in the display. So all of this stuff kind of adds together and adds some complexity to what we need to pull. But with any luck, we'll be able to get this kind of hooked into the context data, write some tests for it, prove that it will display for each of the students in the school year, and go from that point. All right, so where are we going to get this stuff from? And what's the good starting point? As I said in the model diagram, the key entry into connecting a student to the school stuff is through this enrollment model. So we have to query on the enrollment, and we have to tie it back to the school year. So that's the piece of data that we're starting with that we actually do have in this view. And you can see right now it's being assigned directly to the context. That's probably not really what we want in terms of being a local variable. So we're going to probably first maybe start by refactoring this to say, let's take this and drop that there and just say this is going to be school year. This is going to be the local variable that we'll create, and we will change this part to be school year. So that's step number 1. And okay. The reason to do that is because accessing the context every time we want to access the school year, while doable, is kind of inconvenient. So we're going to use this as our handle to make further queries. The other thing I want to do is get the, well, think about the data before we actually get too far. So when this gets displayed, it needs to display each student. So we need to be able to loop over the students. And then from the students, we need to be able to loop over the courses. And as we're looping over those courses, we have dates associated with that. So the most basic flow that I'm thinking of is get the students, which comes from getting the enrollments for that school year. And then from each enrollment, we can pull out the student. Sorry, excuse me. And then we can call the courses together as well, and then merge that together with the actual tool that does the calculation on the course. All right, that's the rough idea I have in my head. If that didn't make any sense to you, don't worry about it. I understand that I've got more modeling context for this application than anyone, really, because I'm the one who sits in it all the time and I designed it. So let's bring up the schools test views file, return to that. And we should already have, we've got this test case already here that has the get request. And the other thing I guess we should check is we want to assert. So I like to add some assertions to my test case to prove that since I'm not necessarily doing full template tests of looking for content in the data, for looking for content in the rendered output, I should say, sorry. I like to have some asserts in my get request and such to prove that I am following a data contract. So it kind of tells future me that, hey, here's the context that the template actually cares about. And by having a list there, I can prove to myself, or at least have some confidence that the template is going to be using that piece of data. So let's start by adding the assert, and we're going to add that there's in the context there is a school year. And it's combined in that no underscore way because this is using, I'm kind of recycling from a previous template that is the detail view. And Django, when you have a multi-word model, instead of like putting them together with an underscore, it just kind of jams them together. So school year is no underscore there, which is why you might think like, why is he doing that for the context? It's because of those detail templates. So we'll run that test and prove that that part is in the context. Now we want to have this structure. And in my mind, the structure is a list. So it's probably, let's like write out what I think the data is going to look like, kind of scratch through it. So it's going to be a list. And in that list will be some dictionaries. And the dictionary will say one key will be the student itself. And that'll be student. And then the other key will be the courses. As I'm talking through that, yeah, we'll do that for now. And the courses will also be a list. But it won't just be a list of course objects. It will be another dictionary, I think. And it will be, the first key will be a course, and the second key is going to be the expected end date, expected completion date. She was very clear to me that it shouldn't be called an end date because this content can change, and so yeah, didn't want to convey that. So we'll say expected completion date, and then have some kind of date. And so that's the structure that we're looking for. I'm not formatting this properly, it seems, but yeah, none of that data truly exists yet, and this is just to give you an idea of this is the data structure that I expect to render in the template, and this is the responsibility, the obligation of the view to put that data structure together. Okay, so first, to get closer to that, and what should we call that? I think the overall data structure list, maybe just called students, even though it's going to be students plus all the info about the students, but it's a good key to iterate over. So let's write this test and assert on what we expect to see. So we want to assert that the context has students, and we want that to be equal to start, let's do a dictionary, an empty dictionary, because we don't have any students created in the test yet, but this will immediately fail because the student's key isn't going to be in there. So we can do the first thing to make the test pass, the simple thing, and that's to say students is equal to an empty list. I mean, this is like pure test-driven development here, where we're doing the simplest thing to make the test pass. I'm not sure why I'm choosing this approach tonight, but I am. I kind of vary depending on how I'm feeling. And this time, it's nice to kind of piece this together since I'm not really 100% confident on the data structure. So that now passes, but what we really want is something different. We want to have a student that's based on an enrollment. And so the next piece to do is to go into our assert, and we're going to change this now to say this is going to be a dictionary, and half of it's going to be the student. We're not going to get to the courses yet. We're just like one piece at a time. And this doesn't work yet because student, that doesn't mean anything. In fact, what it's really going to be is we're going to use an Enrollment Factory. So we'll access it this way, and it'll be an enrollment student. So the enrollment doesn't exist, so we need to put that together. We need to say enrollment is equal to the Enrollment Factory, and that factory is going to take the grade level school year and pass in the school year from the step above. And that's our way to confirm that we're pulling from a grade level that we're allowed to access. So I'm doing that because knowing in the view, like you can see there's this get object or 404 step here that is pulling based on an access control. So we're already making sure that we're gating this so that other users cannot just access somebody else's forecast if they wanted to. That would be impossible to do because of this check to make sure that the user who is logged in is the admin of the school. So by doing the wiring of the data this way, we've got proof that there's an enrollment there. So now I'm convinced that that's the test structure that we want to start. And we can say, okay, give me the test and see if it passes. It doesn't because we haven't done it. We've got a hard-coded list down here. So the next step that we need to do is we need to get our students. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say enrollment, or enrollments is really what we're looking for. And we want to pull from enrollment objects filter, and we want to filter on the grade level school year. And that's going to be equal to the school year object that we already fetched. All right, so the other thing that I want to do to make sure that we're not, because what we're about to do is pull out the students out of the list of enrollments, which means if we were to do any kind of list iterating stuff on it, if I went with this implementation right now, let's say a family has 10 kids that they've got in their home, and this is not totally abnormal for homeschools. Some of these families are quite large. Then as we iterate through them, every time an enrollment tries to pull its student attribute, it's going to do a new database query. This is called the N+1 query problem because you do one query to fetch the collection of things, and then as you loop over them n times, you do another query for each of those. So the way to address that problem is to tell Django, hey, while you're getting the enrollments, go ahead and also do a join in SQL to pull from the student table and pull the student information. And Django will do a join query to get both of those chunks of information and merge them together. So that way when you do enrollment.student, it doesn't have to go back to the database. So it's a single query instead of multiple queries. Okay, so we've got our enrollments. And the next thing to do is to say, well, well, what do we want to say? We want to say, I said this was an object, and it's going to be student of student, and we're going to do for enrollment dot student in enrollments. I really need to fix that highlight color. I cannot see the R on this with this line that I've added. I switched to a dark theme not too long ago, and there's still some adjustments that need to occur. Wow, that's just not even close, Matt. It's enrollment. So we need to loop. We're doing a list comprehension, and there we go. Get my brain working. Sorry about that. So now the test should pass, assuming I did it all correctly. Okay. So we've got our basic structure. And in fact, at this point, we could flip over to the template and render that. The other aspect here is the way this is structured is that it's going to show whoever enrolled first. So whoever has a lower primary key is going to be the thing that the student that appears first on the list. And that may not make sense for the actual application, but I think that's how I'm doing it elsewhere. So we're going to stick with that and not worry about the ordering right now. Maybe there's some future where the ordering gets more specific to like alphabetized by name or something to that effect. Maybe there's another layer of ordering here that the school year, the right answer is probably the school year displays grade levels in a certain order. So it probably makes sense to order by those grade levels, but we're not going to mess with that aspect right now. I think it's going to naturally do the right thing for most circumstances. Okay, so next bit I said that we needed in the structure is the actual courses, and the courses was going to be another list. So we'll take this and we'll extend it. We'll add the courses, and we'll just do an empty list at the moment to continue on the test-driven development style, and it should fail because there's no key there in the dictionary. All right. And this is another challenge, and I've actually experienced this at work recently, is like dictionary, like when you start to get to these complex data structures, you start to see the limitations of PyTest when its ability to compare. And like, this is okay. There's, I guess this is still small enough that you can see everything that's in that dictionary and everything that's in this one. But if the dictionaries get too big, that starts to get annoying and hard to really observe the difference. But I think it's still a reasonable size. So the next thing we want to do is to take this simplest next step that we can and say courses is an empty list. And that should get that test to pass. All right, so now we're on to the next piece of this. Now I need to go find the method that I expected. I think it's on the student model. So let's go, actually, the term that I'm looking for is, I believe, ordered courses. Oh, it's not where I expected it to be. It's on the grade level. Well, rats. That makes sense because it's not really, the student isn't the owner of the course. The student happens to be a participant in a course, but really the student's participation in a course is via the grade level. So we probably also need to come back. Let's close that to give ourselves more space. We need to select the related grade level as well. So we'll do that here. We'll put in grade level into the select related. So that's also going to pull grade level information out of this. And when we get the grade level objects, we will have that. So the next thing that we want to do, and I'm starting to see like our list comprehension, I think, is going to break down because we're getting a little complicated in the data that we're pulling out. So we're going to work from that in a moment. But we'll continue to try and jam it into the list comprehension and just tell it, just doesn't fit anymore. So we've got the, we now have the grade level, and we can get the ordered courses, and that's going to go into this list. But we want those to be a dictionary, like I said. So now it's time to get this into another step. And in order to prove this out, we're going to need a course on the grade level. So let's create a course, and we'll say course factory, not the course resource factory, just the course factory. And we need to say, because it's a many to many, we need to say grade levels in equal enrollment grade level. It gets a little weird with the many-to-many relationship on building the right data in the tests. That's an unfortunate reality of the way all of this is modeled, but you do what you can do. So we're going to create a new dictionary, and the first thing that we want on there is not source, we want course, and we're going to pass in the course. So now we have the student and the course for the grade level that they are part of. And if we run that test, it should fail, which it did. Okay, so we can now come down into this, and we can say, we know we have the grade level, we know we have the enrollment, so we're going to do, this is where it's going to get ugly, and this is where I'm not wild about this. So we'll put it out as a list comprehension first, and then I think I'll refactor it to be a for loop to kind of reflect that it's a more complex data structure that can't cleanly be put into a list comprehension. So we will here say, oops, wrong side of that list. Looks like this. So we're going to say course and course, and then that'll be the close of that, and then we'll say for course in enrollment grade level get ordered courses. Now you can start to see, like, that just got ridiculous. Although black makes the formatting appealing to a degree, but this is going to break down when we have to get the expected date, I promise you. So like, even if you're like, oh, that doesn't look so bad, and I think black was being really generous with how it formatted this, it's going to break down in the next step is my prediction. Oh, and we got a failure. So what's going on? So we've got course. This is the data that I expected on this side. And it maps to the course that we created. The student is definitely enrolled in that grade level because we made an enrollment specifically wiring those together. It's possible. Did I mess up? I could have messed up how this factory is being built. Let's find some other examples of the course factory with grade levels, because I know I've done that many times, and it could just be that I'm messing it up. Yeah. So look at the rest of all the rest of these are saying it's actually not using the in operator. I goofed on that. So we just need to say grade levels. All right. And it was feeling a little wrong when I wrote it, but I was willing to let it break and see what happens. Okay, let's try the test again. Hopefully it's correct this time. All right. Now that's more what I expected. Okay, here's where we get back to the chunk of code. I haven't even talked about the refactoring we did last week and the code bit that we added that will help complete this, because there's a chunk of code that does all this calculation. And we move that chunk of code to a file called the forecaster. Forecaster takes a student and it takes a course and it figures it out. Figures out everything you need to do to get the end date. And this was a complicated chunk of logic. You can see it's not a super long file. It's only, the whole file is 71 lines, but there's a lot of like weird little edge cases in here that have to factor in school breaks and all these other bits. It's just kind of like, what? That's kind of annoying. So there's some stuff we need to consider here. I'm already seeing performance problems sneaking in here that are going to do a bunch more calculation than we want to do. That's a little disturbing. So we'll see what we can do about that. The biggest thing is like, okay, let's think about this. This forecaster has to do this computation, and it passes in the student and the course. But once you get into this method that's building this list of stuff and figuring out the dates, from the course we pull the school year. From the school year we check on all of the school break models, and those are just a couple of pieces. And then we go and we pull from the course task table. There's a ton of data that is coming into this, and then that's not even counting the graded work. Like the query count for this could be ridiculous if we don't do the appropriate joins to get the right data. So I think what I want to do is put in the dumb version of this, and then we're going to put on the debug toolbar, and we're going to see all of the queries that I anticipate are going to be in there and just completely bonkers broken. And that should give us something to work from as a target to say, like, here's how bad this could get, and here's what happens if you let your queries and methods be unplanned and get away from you. But that's stuff that you don't notice unless you're like specifically paying attention to performance. And performance matters because once you get a bunch of users on your site, they're going to care. And if you've got bad pages that are popular pages, I don't know the popularity of this page, but you still don't want pages performing really badly. Okay, so the next thing we want the expected end date. And I think we're going to have to do a few things to make sure that this is consistent. We need to create a single task so that there is an expected end date. And well, I guess that's also a missing test that we need, is some of these courses that, going back to the forecaster, the last forecast date, that is the thing that we're going to be pulling from, is an optional thing. Because there are a couple of circumstances where it's not actually possible to get the last date. And so that's going to be a challenging aspect of this, is like, we have to factor in, what do you do when the expected last date has no value? So we'll have to consider that as well. All right, I'm trying to think through next steps. I don't want to rush this in my head about how to go about this. Okay, next step I think is to change the test. So we have the expectation. So we want to set this thing up such that there is a date that's going to appear. And let's do the easiest case to pin this down is based on when a user actually completed a chunk of work. So to do that, we can create a coursework, and coursework has a completed date associated with it. And we can say that we can say what? We'll say the coursework factory, and then we're not going to directly create the course task, but we will associate it with the course that we just created. All right. So I guess we'll also have to need to pull in the coursework factory, which is from the students area. So right here we'll say coursework factory. Whoops. All right. So now coming down to our expected data structure, we'll say, what should we call this? Let's try and keep it simple. Last date is the name that we could put in the data structure. And I think that maps well with what I called the forecaster. It says last forecast date. Yeah. We'll use that just to be super consistent. So last forecast date. And then we'll say the other side is going to be the coursework completed date, completion date. I think it's completed date. Yeah, it's completed date. You can see it right here. So essentially we want to hit this line right here is what's ultimately what we were going to go for in this particular test. And this test should fail. So I think the next thing that we can do, this is where we are going to have to refactor the actual view code, because we need to bring in a forecaster now. And the forecaster is something that we'll have to create one of, pass it the student in the course, and say, give me the date. And we'll have to do that in a loop, which we don't really have that opportunity with a list comprehension here. So we'll start by, how should we start? We'll say students is a list, and then we will say context students is equal to that variable. And that's the thing we're going to put data into. And then we're essentially going to rewrite this chunk of code right here to give ourselves what we need. So the outermost loop that we have to go over is the enrollment loop. That was the first part of the comprehension. So we're going to go through each of the enrollments. And maybe this, it probably would have been better to like refactor this to this first before modifying our test behavior, but that's okay. So we're going to need to append to the students list I'll call it a student info, because that's kind of what it is. It's a collection of, it's really not, it's a primitive, it's a dictionary that has student, and so that's going to go in there. So we need the student info, which, as I said just a second ago, is minimally, it has the student. Wow, I can't even read that because it's just red on red. That's brutal. Okay, which I spelled wrong, so I wouldn't have seen that. So that's going to be the enrollment student. So even getting this far, we're kind of getting back to the data structure that we already built out. It doesn't have the courses anymore. So that whole key is going to be missing. We're missing the inner comprehension. And that's the piece that we need to build in a second level of the for loop. So we're essentially unrolling the list comprehension into something that we can use. So now we want to say for course in enrollment grade level get ordered courses, and then do what? We want to take the student info and set the well, nope, not quite. So we need to put courses in here and say that's going to be a list. And so we want to append to this course info, or this courses key, we want to append a new dictionary. And that's going to be a course info. Again, I'm calling it info. I don't know where I devised this particular pattern for our name. It's not fantastic, but it works. That to kind of indicate that it's not a course object, it's not a course model object, it's something else. It's a course model object plus some other stuff. Okay, so we need to say we actually need a course info then, which is again going to be another dictionary. And now we're getting back close to where we were to get parity. Okay, so this test is still going to still going to fail. Apparently, I ran the whole file that time, and it's going to fail because we're looking for the last forecast date. It's not in there. The rest of it should be fine though. But here's where we can bring in the forecaster and actually do the rest of what we expect. In fact, at this point, I think we've done everything that was in the old comprehension, so I'm going to delete that code. And this code is starting to look pretty darn dense, so I'm going to give it some breathing room just for my own sanity. Yeah, that's probably okay. Just kind of give it some space. Not strictly necessary, but you know, just like white space is good in a website design, there is some benefit to having vertical white space between and having blank lines between stuff to kind of visually group things together. Some people prefer like ultra dense code, but I think I don't think that's the best. So we have the course and in the course info, and we're going to have the other piece here is the last forecast. Forecast date is what we called it. And that's the key. And that's where we call the forecaster that doesn't exist yet. So I'll just leave that there as a red thing. And we'll say forecaster is equal to a forecaster that takes the student and it takes the course. But that's going to break because there is no student directly. You got to get it through the enrollment. And we need to get the forecaster from the other import that we haven't done yet. So the forecaster is from.forecaster import forecaster. All right. Still haven't used it though, so it's still complaining. It's also telling me, oh, I guess maybe we didn't give that as data. All right, let's bring up the forecaster, but clearly we didn't do it in an init method. All right, so we just create it and then use it. So let's delete all the inside. Where'd I go there? Let's delete all the inside of that stuff. And then we're going to say forecaster get last forecast date and pass the enrollment student and the course. Now if we run all the tests for this file, boom, we actually get what we expect. So the last forecast date corresponded to the coursework. So this is actually really good. This is good. We're ready to move on, I think, to the template. And yeah, check it out. See how it goes. And then start to see how bad the performance is, because I'm predicting it's going to be pretty bad. So let's return to that forecast HTML file. Forecast HTML. So step one here, trying to think if I want to bring in another table first and then modify that to use the data, or if I just want to see the data. Yeah, let's just see the data for now and see how bad the forecasting is, and then kind of clean up the design. So we've got a loop, and the outermost loop is for the student in, or actually I guess it's the student info in the students. That's the first thing we've got. And we can print out, we'll just put a bunch of paragraph tags for all this stuff. We'll say student info dot student. That should get the string representation for the student, which is their name. And the server's been running this whole time, so we should be able to refresh this, and yep, we got my kids' names, which is the test data that I have for this account. All right, so that's layer 1. And then we go to the next layer, and we say for course info in student info dot courses, and we will print the course info course. And let's also go ahead and put the forecast date. Why not? So the course info last forecast date. And I mean, as like we just did all that work basically for 2 for loops in a template. That's how it goes. All right, so wall of data, but this is exactly what she's looking for. I mean, there's some cleanup to do. Like, it's not possible to have a date on some of these things, but this is it. All right, now let's go see how brutal the actual performance is. It may not be the end of the world. It may not even be worth optimizing that much. It depends, but it could be pretty eye-opening. So we got the debug toolbar. I was waiting for that to load. Yeah, 197 queries. That is terrible. I would expect this to be, well, a number far less than that. I don't know. And since we're working locally here, this is, you don't even like really notice. But when you have an actual website and you have like a family, there's going to be that family that if the site is successful and you're around long enough, you're going to find these edge cases, these outlier groups, and there's going to be a family with 10 students, and each student is doing 15 subjects, and each one of them has hundreds of tasks, and like all of these things add up to be this just explosive number of queries that has to happen. And we're looking at 197 queries for 2 students, which is just crazy, crazy, crazy. So what's happening is what I feared, is that the forecaster is not very efficient for this page. Now, here's the weird part though. If we go look at the students, or if we go to the week view, and so that's going to bring up all of the student information, and then we can go from that page and look at a specific course, and then see how many queries are happening on that one. So let's pick, for example, Math 2 here. All right, and then let's look at the debug toolbar. 10 queries. Why is that? So the way this is, so you see all these dates here. This comes from the forecaster, the refactored code. And the thing that we're looking at on the forecast page is this very last date. So if we go over to that other view and check out Math 2, it should say July 16th. In fact, let's do that. Just go see if just to kind of prove to ourselves that it's right. So it's running all these queries right now. It's a lot. It doesn't understand why you're doing this to it. There we go, July 16th. Okay, so what happened? We added some select relateds back on the view, but it wasn't good enough. We got the select relateds here. In fact, we can make this even worse. Let's make it worse just to see how bad it can get. So we'll take that out. We'll do that. And so we've got 197 queries now. Well, it's only going to probably increase by maybe 4 or something like that. We'll see. Still loading. Yeah, it increased by 4. I was able to do that math because there's 2 students, and it had to do a query for each student as well as each grade level for the enrollment. So there's 4 additional queries. So that part's not so bad. So it seemed like the optimization that we did of doing a select related here just didn't cut it. And it's true, it didn't. It's because this get ordered list of courses does not, that gets passed in here, there's so much data that is pulled out of this course. The course is used as this anchor point that pulls out all this other stuff that we saw. And what we can return to the forecaster to prove that. And as I said, it had to do, does most of its work. The actual forecast date method that we're using goes through all of that task processing and does the full list of tasks that you saw on that other page, and then just checks the last one. So it does the kind of the stupidest approach possible. Maybe there's a smarter way to do this that bypasses all of that computation. I'm not really sure, but really what we want to get into is what can we do to optimize and perhaps prefetch the extra data that we're going to need for this stuff. So one area that this really breaks down in is this access right here on line 32. So every time we're doing a course, it's accessing the school year. But nothing about this get ordered courses said you need to go ahead and have the school year, prefetch the school year. So there's one. And then once you access the school year and give it a date, this is break thing has to do another set of queries. And we can probably see some of the evidence of this by looking at the debug toolbar. So it gets the courses, it gets the grade levels, and where does it start doing other stuff? So it's got to do this school break. That's from the school year. That is break method that we saw. Let's see if it shows up. Some of the challenge here is you got to filter out which stuff belongs to GUnicorn and which stuff is actually from your code. Yeah, here we go. So this Boolean is break method actually has a lot behind it. It needs to check the breaks, and before the breaks, there's a cache that gets created for every school year instance. So the first time you ask, if you're asking about on that request, what breaks are available for the school year, and breaks for the context is like vacation days. When are you going on holiday for your family? And it needs to be able to answer that. So rather than answer it one at a time, I took the approach of just say, give me all the breaks and let's shove them all in a dictionary and cache it for that school year instance. But the problem is when course.schoolyear happens, Django is doing a fetch for the school year each time, and it's not a shared cache. So even though the school year for all of those courses is exactly the same, each one of them has their own cache of breaks. So all of the breaks for the school year have to be fetched over and over and over again. So really we want to go in there and say, hey, look, here's an optimization, just do one school year. So I don't remember, I think here there's a problem we're going to encounter, I believe. So let's go to the grade level and look at that problem. If we go to the, where is this model? I think it's in the school models. So one of these I think is grade level. All right. So here's the problem. This is not a query set. It is a list, which means that the database access has already happened by the time that this method runs. It's really unfortunate. So I'm trying to think of like what we can do to optimize this path. One thing we could do is replace the school year attribute ourselves. I don't know, that seems like a crazy idea, but it may be worth it. And we might want to do it, this might just be an optimization that we want to put in this method, in the get ordered courses, because knowing that I don't have the access to the school year here, it might make sense to go ahead and get the school year for one of them and assign it like after the list. So what would that look like? This would reduce a huge number of queries, I think. So let's try this. I don't know that this will be successful, but we'll try. So we'll change this to courses as a list, and we're going to return courses after we're done. And so essentially we're like eager loading a chunk of code. We're saying like, this is so often going to be used, the school year attribute, that we'll prefetch it and stick it on all of the courses ourselves. So the grade level, we're already in the grade level model. So we'll do an access to get the school year. Or really what we can do is we can say, we can't do this on a comprehension. So we'll say for course in courses, and then we'll say course school year is equal to the self school year. So I'm hoping what this does is it like will replace Django's attribute access, so that when Django tries to fetch the school year for the first time, it'll see like, oh, I already have an instance here. I don't need to go do an additional query because we have taken that and deliberately attached that information here. And I'm trying to remember how the school year is even able to be attached to the course. Is that a property of the course model? Because that's not something that's actually part of the model. So it's probably just going, yeah, look at all the stuff that it's doing. Wow, 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 wow. Good gracious. Yeah, this is how ridiculous it gets. So we already have the grade level fetched, and we're getting the courses, and we're going to this school year property. The school year property is going back, and it's going to the many-to-many relationship, so it's actually going back up to the grade levels. So this number of SQL queries is starting to make sense. So before here, right here in this chunk of code, I think, when the course is trying to get access to its own school year, it is going back through its set of grade levels and then looking up at the school year. So it's like doing this whole weird dance where in this ordered model method, we already have the school year, or we already have close access to it. We know it's coming from a grade level. We know it's a real school year. So it makes zero sense to go through this cached property. All right. So I'm afraid, though, that because we're going through the cache property, that Django is not going to be happy about that. It's going to probably say like you can't do, it's a property and not a setter. So it's probably going to say you can't do this. So let's try it out, see what happens. Oh, I was wrong. So we dramatically reduce the number of queries. It's still a lot. It's still 125. That's a ton. But it's not 197. So we knocked out one category of errors. They're not errors, they're just performance problems. By taking this eager loading step of putting the school year directly on the course. And, well, I don't know, this part probably doesn't matter, but let's do one minor thing here. This is probably a micro optimization that really isn't going to be measurably different. We can, so even attribute access requires some extra processing. It requires essentially a dictionary lookup. So if we assign this to a local variable first and then do this in a loop, then that attribute access is not going to be there. That probably is almost negligible impact, but we can, it's just while we're here, we can make that change. All right. So 125 queries. Where do we go next? Is there a way that we can continue to optimize this? How much do we need to? Let's look at that next. Because I would love to get this down to a reasonable number where these n+1 query bugs, which is, you can see happening here whenever it says 38, so 38 must be the number of courses that we're looping over. And so it's doing this 38, it's Django debug toolbar is detecting as a pattern that we're doing this 38 times. And that is what I'd like to try and eliminate. I don't know that we can, but because, yeah, we probably can't for some of these things because we have to ask the question 38 times. Like, what is the end date for each of those courses? There are 38 of them. It's unavoidable. So we need to at least go through it once, but maybe the thing that we can optimize is if there is a set pattern of these are the queries that we run for each of the 38, can we reduce one of those? Can we find something that we could optimize in there? And the answer might be no, not easily, in which case we'll just say, okay, this is going to be how it is, and it won't be the slowest, or excuse me, it won't be the fastest page on the site, but it's a page with a lot of information and calculation, so maybe that's okay. And the performance might be reasonable enough for most cases. Okay, so let's see if we can see where the pattern is. So we probably want to focus on where it starts with this number of 38 similar queries and see if we can find there's got to be like a loop of these. So I see students coursework, students enrollment, course task. Student coursework, student enrollment, course task. All right, so that's the loop. It's got to do that for each of them. We can maybe dig into which one's doing which. We're pulling from the enrollment table again. Well, let's see what this can tell us. Maybe there's more information about the code where it can highlight this pattern. So let's start the coursework. What is actually calling this query? And what is it trying to do? So the first thing it's trying to do is get the coursework. Actually, let's just go down the code, see if we can find it. Yeah, okay. So you have to get all of the coursework for the course. That's not avoidable. That has to be done because it is, it goes into the computation. Because if a student has done some of the coursework, it affects like when dates complete and so on. So that's there. And then it actually happens at this line in the get coursework by task. But maybe the method in this forecaster is not optimized on its own. So let's look at that for a minute. We've got this big loop that's doing all this stuff, and here's where it's doing that first query, because it has to populate this courseworks by task dictionary so that it can do lookups to say, is this done or not? Okay. I think that's a necessary piece. And it's a piece that we have to ask for each course. So Hey, Tom Tries, welcomes. We're doing some optimization work at this point. If you got any questions, feel free to ask. So the only thing I could think of is perhaps we could, when fetching the courses, also fetch all of the tasks. Is that even reasonable? No, not really. We'd have to like fetch. It'd be a pretty monstrous join. So I don't even know if it's going to be that beneficial. So you can see here, we're doing the coursework and getting the task at the same time. So we're at least doing that optimization in one step. We know we need to get all the coursework to do some of this computation. We know we need to loop over all the tasks. So that's done in one step. That's good. Or it appears to be. Maybe it's not actually, in which case we need to rethink something. So that's that first query. And that's why you can see there's a join. There's an inner join here. And it's getting the student's coursework and the course's course task all together. So that's what that first query does. All right, next, what is this guy? So interestingly, it's doing another query on the enrollment and grade level. That seems wrong because we've already done, at least from the point of view of this forecast view, we've already done an enrollment lookup. So what is this doing? How is this getting in here? Okay. So we have get tasks for course and selects graded work. That's interesting. Well, let's look at that for a moment. I think this might be another one where it's like an annoying thing we've got to do. Here is this enrollments by course cache. So I think this cache is not being populated. Yeah, look at that. So we actually, so there's a get the active courses for the school year is using this cache. Get tasks for course is trying to pull from the cache, but it's only, the cache is only being populated in one spot. So what's happening? Okay, so this might be a spot we can optimize, maybe. Because the, in the view that we were working with, we have the enrollment. So in theory, oh, but we don't have the courses yet. Sorry, y'all, I'm just trying to think through some of this stuff and what it's doing. this is the part right here that makes the that makes this hard, is that the student grade level, the tasks that they can be in, can come from either tasks that are just about the grade level specifically, or well, I'm not saying that very well. A course can have tasks, and those tasks can be for a specific grade level. So like getting back to this example where my kids had a shared art course. Well, maybe my son, who's a little bit older, has to do some extra studying on some certain aspect of the art. It would be possible to add a task that was specific to his grade level that was higher that my daughter doesn't have to do. And that's why this logic is in here. And so it gets a little complicated, and that's why this method has to be here. Like, this is how you have to get the tasks, because it has to factor in that scenario. You can't just query the task table directly. So the challenge is, because I'm not like linking together a bunch of query sets, there's some extra querying here, which is why I had these caches on here. But this cache is empty for the students, and it's only filled when asking for the active courses. So that's one layer of queries somewhere through here. That's this enrollment and grade level set right here. So 38 of these queries, these join queries, are coming from doing this check on the enrollment table over and over and over again when it doesn't need to. All right, so let me think if there's a way we can get into this. So it's telling us line 287 get tasks for 287. Yeah, it's coming in here and it's a cache miss essentially. So what can we do, if anything, to make that better? Is there can we populate the cache? I'm kind of getting myself convinced that this may not be worth the effort right now. Like there could be, like, if the app was ever wildly successful and this page was showing up on a performance monitoring tool that, like, this is the worst page on the site, well then sure. But I think we're just kind of, I'm working myself into, not a corner, but just saying, like, this is, for the level of effort that we're getting out of this, it's not very evident that it's going to have a huge payoff. So let's say, okay, that is a cold cache that we could fix, but maybe it's not worth it. So let's leave that one alone. All right, so why are we coming back for this course task and graded work? Thought we already did that. Oh, okay. We did build the query set. That is happening. It's down here. But it is not being processed in the loop until after this line. So this call is calling this private method that gets the query set, and then it does that. In fact, maybe I'll just reorder this, because, like, well, I guess it doesn't truly matter. Or actually, wait a minute. No, they're two different kinds of relationships. I'm sorry, they both are necessary, but they're different. So one of them is a map of, here's all the coursework you've already done. The coursework is like the actual work that the student has completed. And so it has a set of tasks to kind of overlay onto, here's all the tasks total, here's what the student has done, and there's a a union that happens there. And of course, if the student has done everything in the course, the union is full, like it becomes a full merged set together. But we don't know that until at this point when this calculation is happening. So both queries are required, and just because they do different purposes. All right, so I think I'm kind of explaining to myself that that's necessary. The one optimization that I see is that we could further take on, if we wanted to continue to refine this, is to warm up that cache for the student for enrollment. I just don't know that it's going to be a big problem. And again, I'm not really doing a lot of performance monitoring on this. And this is a page that will not be the super most common page to use on the site. So I'm not really worried that it's going to tank the performance of the whole site. So I think getting it down from 197 to 125 with those couple lines change that we did on that ordered course thing, that felt like the right thing to do. And where was that? Like this change right here. Let's go back and comment that on the schools model, and that should be sufficient for now. So we'll say eager load the school year to avoid performance hit of hitting the cached property on course in a loop. Okay. I feel good about that. I think it was the right change. Okay, I think that sort of brings us to nearly to the end of what we need to do. Now, the rest of this, actually, let's do one thing. Let's kill the server for a minute. Let's let that run while we chat. So it's going to check that all the tests are right. I think the last thing that really we want to do for the rest of the stream is go in and take that couple of for loops that we have and make a table out of it. And I'm probably will borrow from a pre-existing table that in fact that one we were looking at that had the planned dates might be the closest thing we care about, because it already had a format. It was pretty close anyway. It had a format that showed the student. You could use that as the header or a H2 tag, and it had the table. It had a table of tasks, but we could repurpose that to be a table of courses and list out the dates. So let's see that all of our tests are still passing. Good, they all are. We've got 100% coverage. I think we're ready to move on. Well, it's curious. I don't know if it's the stream or what, but that was way slower than in the past. Not sure what's happening there. Something to debug later. Okay. So let's return to this forecast view. And the other one that we want to bring up is the student course view. Well, is that really we might need to borrow pieces from other spots. Like we need a header, common header that we use, and the best one that I can think of is from the daily page to actually get the student. Where are you? Is this what? Yeah, there's an H2. Let's use the student first name. That feels right. I don't think that we need to print this one, so I'm not too worried about that part. But let's take this piece and let's put it in our template. Let's replace this paragraph tag and fill in, change the schedule here to student info. Let's take a look. So I think that's all we need the daily template for. Restart and see how it goes. So now we've got Mark and Faye. We don't need their last names in here. And then we just need to fill in this table with something more reasonable. So the next thing I want to pull from is this task items table right here. That is not going to work initially. It's got all sorts of information that has nothing to do with what we need. The challenge with some of these is like they're so customized that I don't necessarily, like I want the styling, but all of the HTML baggage that you don't realize is necessarily under the covers is there too. So let's kind of poke around and see if there's another place that is more appropriate. We've got this kind of simple progress report page. That's pretty good. Maybe we just need this, because that is a very reasonable format. This is just all the grades and stuff that they'll use. All right. I'm liking this one. It's a lot less, there's a lot less stuff there. The other one that we were looking at that I was thinking of using was that one on the week view. But what's here that you don't necessarily realize is that all of these are clickable, all those links over here. So there's extra markup here that we don't necessarily need. There's a bunch of hidden markup to jump back to stuff appropriately. And I think that's just going to be overkill. I don't think we need to, well, at some point those courses will probably be clickable. I'm guessing that'll be a pretty quick feature request after that, but we'll start with the simple and get the data out there, and then my spouse can tell me, here's what I'd like to see. So this is the report, progress report, the progress report page. And we've got the table. This is the table that we want right here. And you can see this is much, much, much simpler. It's like 10 lines of table code. I mean, it's really not much at all. Just plop it there. And we're going to take this name of task. We'll change it to course. And we'll change score to, I'll call it forecast date for now, or maybe last forecast date, like the variable is called. And if she doesn't like that name, she can tell me. And then we've got we actually need to populate it now. So what goes in here? Well, that's the overarching table. Like, I guess we need, so we don't even need to like loop over this the way it's being looped over. It's actually unnecessary. So we need to drop this for loop into this level here and get rid of the grades thing, get rid of the end for here, and we'll get rid of that paragraph tag in a minute. So I moved the tags a little bit so that they all line up. And then we can go to grade here and we'll change around that stuff and say course info course. That's the first bit. And the second bit is the course info last forecast date. We need another template tag there, we'll get to in a second, because we have none for sometimes. So that needs to display something appropriate. Ooh, okay. Well, still stuff to clean up here. Let's resize the flex box to give it some better, more appropriate sizing. We'll switch it from 5/6. So these courses, they don't have near the same space requirements. So the other table was like tasks and stuff, and the task names can be quite a bit longer than a course name typically. So I think we can change a few aspects of this. We can bring in the dimensions quite a lot. We can say instead of max 2XL, we'll say that the whole thing is a max XL. That brings it in. Maybe even that's, well, let's get the spacing of the columns right first. I'll keep it on 6th just in case I ever want to change it quickly, because switching it to thirds is, then you can only work in thirds. But for the moment, I'm going to do 4/6 and 2/6. And that should switch it to thirds, but with a more granular control. So boom, that was what I was hoping to get out of that. The last forecast date becomes a one-line thing. And you can see we've got none, and that's the thing that we need to change. So we want, ooh, there's some funky stuff in here. Well, I'll get some, my problem is my test account has like a bunch of stuff that I'm unsure about now. So I don't know if this double science entry is because I put 2 different science classes in there with the same name, or if it's something else. But what I want to do is say, instead of none here, say like unable to forecast. And so that attribute right now is literally a none. And so we want to go to Django's built-in template tags, something I search for all the time, so it's nice and conveniently in my search history. And we want to go and use a tag called, I think it's this one, default if none. So this is a filter that we put on something, and we can say, get rid of the progress report, we're done with that. And now we can go to the forecast date, and we know that this could be none. So we put a filter that says default if none. And for now, I'm just going to say unable to forecast yeah, let's leave it at that, see how it fits. Don't need that. Don't need that. Unable to forecast. Okay, great. This is the default format for the date, which I don't think is consistent with other places that I've used. In fact, I just closed one of the history. Yeah. So it's really in this year, month, date format. So let's be using that. So that was on the school course page. No, the student course page. And so there's probably a date, yeah, YMD. So we're going to go to, oh, junk. All right. Well, so because of that, we can't really do the date filter, I think, because we've already got a filter on there that is default if none. Can you chain those together? God, that's a good question. Django default if none date filter. I don't know. Maybe you can. Change the order of filters. Okay, you can put the date first. We'll find out. I should have just tried it. So we're going to put in front of the default if none, we'll say date is equal to ymd, or default if none of unable to forecast. Whoops, not what I wanted. Okay, rats. That Stack Overflow had default, so I wonder if that will change it. That doesn't make me feel good. Why does that work, Django? Use default. Oh, that's tricky. Look at this little hint here. So the date filter will return an empty string if it's not a date time or a date object. So it's taking advantage of that to chain it together. So really what it is doing is it's returning something and passing the return to default. And by the reason it wasn't showing anything with default if none is because it wasn't a none anymore. At that point, it was an empty string. All right, I'll let that slide right now. Not really wild about that part, but okay. Now let's try putting a text center on here, see if it looks any better than it does right now, because that label is a little long. Nah, that's just weird. Because this is so much longer. Yeah, let's undo that part. So we'll live with a little bit of left side alignment there, that even though it doesn't quite match up super well, it's okay. And maybe we should just do 50-50. Let's try that. So let's replace all of these. Okay, I think that reads better. And instead of extra large, what if we change it to a large? Keep just bringing it down. Because I don't think there's any real reason to make the user visually kind of like, course date over there, that's really spread out. That doesn't make sense to me. And this is actually quite a long course name from what I've seen, especially compared to what you can see here, but I just mean in the general appearance on the school year. So I anticipate that there will not be many courses that have a name that are much longer than that next into the second line. I'm okay if that happens. Yeah. All right. So here we go. We got it. This is the projected dates. I think it answers what is needed for this particular feature, and it can be extended, but we don't have a need to do that yet. There's probably some future here that I need to explain what unable to forecast means, but right now I think that's okay to leave it as is, a kind of minimal, and I think this will probably make her pretty happy. So let's review what we've got here. We made this change to get ordered courses to eagerly load in the school year to try and make this performance optimization. We wrote our test that has the context, and ultimately we're not really testing a lot here. Like the actual test to do everything that we need to do, it's only a handful of lines of additional tests to an existing test to assert on the context. So that's kind of nice. There's probably some stuff that we could test better or more by putting more in there, but I don't really feel like it right now. This is sufficient. Getting down to the actual view code, we did have to make a bunch of stuff here. We had to change that comprehension into a more complex loop that is building all of this data together. There is perhaps an argument to extract this into the forecaster. I don't know. I'm not really sure that that's necessary. If you joined in last time, the way that I did this is I took logic that was in a view and put it in the forecaster, and that forecaster, then we can use that in this view, and now we're using the same forecaster again. So there is an argument to be said of, well, what if we flip this on its head and say, hey, forecaster, give me all of the last forecasted dates for all of the students' courses, and here is the student and the school year that you want to check out. In that case, maybe there is some optimization that could be done, or just regrouping. I don't really know, but I'm not gonna try and over optimize the problem of make this perfect. And then we've got this little chunk of template code, and that was really all that we had to do to make a kind of simple display that shows exactly the information that my user is looking for. And I think we tested it out. It seems to do what it needs to do. So I'm going to call that the first version of this feature that I'm okay shipping, and turn that on for her. And I think that's probably going to bring us to the end of the stream. I've been going for nearly, well, coming up on an hour and 45 minutes, and we've been working on a single page. Hopefully this was instructive to you. There's a lot that goes into making that work. I will take this content and turn it around and put it up on YouTube on the channel. You can go find me as Matt Lehman on YouTube, and I've got videos from all of my streams up there, even the really, really rough ones in the first one. So if you go all the way back to the beginning, it's come a long way. I'll say that much. So this content will go out, it'll probably go out by tomorrow. Hope you found this useful. If you did, please give me a follow or a like or subscribe or whatever platform you're viewing this on. That would be really helpful. And I hope you have a great night. Take care.